it wasn't even that I could do a better job, it's just that I would never know whether or not I could do a better job if I didn't try something. And even after realizing that, it was a long, hard fight of several months before I would say I finally started my first thing, and that thing didn't work. And then it was another couple months and I started a second thing and that thing didn't work either. But the lesson I learned through the several failures and the current things that I have going right now is that the only guaranteed failure is if you don't start. There's a lot of things that I've started that I haven't finished. I probably have 4 books on a computer back home and I haven't finished any of them. But I was thinking about that this morning, and those books are not unfinished in a way. They're still ideas that I have that, and lessons that I've learned, and information as I continue to move throughout the world and learn lessons about my entrepreneurialism and the people that I interact with. Still inform those ideas that are in the back of my mind, and there's still material there that I could use at any future date. The thing that I got out of starting many of the ideas that I haven't finished is just the option, I think, is the main value of those things. Is that if I hadn't started them, they might be gone now. I might have forgotten about them, or I never would have given them another thought. But now I have something there to kind of spark future me to maybe embark on a new project, or just revisit an old one. And that's another value of starting, is that it's a way of holding your future self accountable to an idea that you had, and it's not a hard commitment, and that's good about it too, because life is short, and you're not going to have time to follow through on all of the ideas that you have. But that's not a good reason to not follow through on any of them. So even if you think you might not finish something, getting started on it is a great way to just tuck it away in your back pocket and give yourself the option of coming back to it in the future.
All right, thank you guys so much for being here, tuning in to Power That Be. This is awesome. What we're going to talk about today is a concept that will help you no matter where you are and what you're doing in life. It doesn't matter if you're homeless, addicted to drugs, living in a high-rise flat with millions of dollars, or miserably comfortable. If you take this information as a friendly reminder, it will help you. And I know this to be true because I've used these concepts when I was homeless, and I still use them today. I have a pretty remarkable life and more than enough resources, so I'm grateful for that. So these things do work. The concept that I'm talking about is a statement that starters are finishers. There are many people that are not doing what they love to do because they're so intimidated by the end result that they don't even start. So the fact is, you have no chance of reaching your desired goal if you never start. So I know that seems simple, but once again, this is one of those examples in life that many of the important messages we get are quite simple. So we have a very special guest today. This is Michael Marvosh. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm honored. This guy here, he's an exploratory entrepreneur, and he also is a high school student tutor, which is a wonderful service. Thank you for that. We need as much of that in the society as we can get. And he's a very intelligent man. He's offered myself, and I'm sure many others, a great deal of insight and inspiration. And yeah, so it's great to have you here. Him and I were at the park last week, and we had a very inspiring conversation that sparked my interest in wanting to share this with you all. So here we are, and I think it would be great to start with one of the important things you were talking about that I have a feeling that a lot of the viewers will be able to relate to. It's not so much about how people think that they'll get to their dream, or I think it's more about what you started off with, and it was very important. You remember when you were talking about the trial and error process? Does that remember that?
Yeah, and it kind of goes back a little bit to what you said in your introduction, is that not starting is the only guarantee of failure. And my personal struggle from being a professional to kind of transitioning into being an entrepreneur was definitely a process of getting over that fear of starting. Definitely had to overcome that. And a lot of that fear for me, I suppose it's going to be different for everyone, but a lot of that fear for me was this idea that, oh, if I try something, it's not going to work.
Right.
And
yeah,
the interesting thing is, I was right. A lot of the things that I have tried haven't worked. But the fact that I started them really taught me hundreds of lessons about how to make things work that had I not started, I would never have gotten.
That's
right.
Totally
so I can
true.
see that even though I've started and failed and started and failed multiple times, it's this cycle, I'm now moving. I'm moving forward. I'm taking steps to kind of create the things that I want to create, either the businesses or the relationships or whatever. And that's a process of trying something and see if it works. Oh, it didn't work? Okay, try something different. And if I never would have tried that first thing, if I never would have started, I wouldn't even have the chance of finishing. So
Absolutely.
it's really, starting is not this magic bullet that's going to automatically mean that you're successful in everything that you try.
Right.
But it is a way to engage with the world to find out whether or not there's any chance of succeeding in that idea that you have.
I think that's a great point. And
Yeah.
with that, let's take a look at that. Let's go back to that park for a moment.
Yeah, in my case, I can't speak for other people, of course. In my case, it was just knowing what I love to do, and that has never been an easy question to answer for me. And it was like what I mentioned earlier with the guy I chatted with yesterday. It's like his wife asked him that question, and he just knew the answer. And I've never been that way, so I don't know if I'm just less, able to kind of abstractly imagine myself in situations than some people, but yeah, it's like, yeah, for me, it's a matter of trial and error. So starting the process of trial and error, I think, was a big thing for me.
All right, so some great information there. The next thing I think that's important to cover, which you also had some wonderful things to say about, is time. I find that that's one of the biggest excuses. I don't have the time. I myself, full-time student, started my business as a successful life coach advocate, also doing, you and I are here with Power That Be, which is great, all these things, and I do not use that term, I don't have the time, because if I really want to do it, I know that I will make the time. And you had a wonderful thing to say about the amount of time that we each have in a day. So I really liked that.
Yeah.
So how do you...
Time is kind of a unique example of an excuse of why not to start, because everyone in the world is either time rich or time poor, and it's entirely dependent upon their perspective, because we all have the same amount of time. So, I mean, let's check out what we said in the park that day. People blame a lack of time. And the thought that I had there was, it's something you hear very often, like, everybody, no matter how successful or how unsuccessful they are, has the exact same number of hours in the day.
That's true.
And so, yeah, anyone who says, oh, I don't have enough time to get started, like, that is obviously not true.
That's
not
right.
objectively true, right? Because there are people who have done it, and they do not have some special resource of hours in the day that you don't have access to.
They can slow time down.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's not a thing, as far as I'm aware.
All right. So, the next thing that is unbelievably prevalent is that I don't have the money. I don't have the money to get the guitar because I want to be a musician, so I haven't started. I don't have the money for voice lessons. I love to sing, but I'm not going to start until I have the voice lessons. Mm-hmm. I want to start a business owning, selling mopeds, but I don't know anything about it, and I don't have the money to be taught what it is to run a business. All of these things about money. I mean, would you agree that there's something about the starting process that just eludes people? Because when they think about the end result and when it comes to money, they're so focused on what they should have in the future rather than what they have right now.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. You took it in a little bit of a different direction than I maybe would have taken it myself. But yeah, I think people who are thinking of taking an entrepreneurial venture or learning how to be a musician or anything like that are often looking at an example of someone who is already an expert at that thing and saying, and saying, okay, what would it be like if I were there? They say it would take me this much money, for example.
Right.
But the thing they forget and the excuse that they make to not start to get there is that that person also at some point started. And
good point.
So, yeah, looking at a finished product and saying I want to be that finished product is fine. It's well and good, and we need that to get started.
Of course.
But there's a first step towards becoming that musician or that business owner or that PhD holder or whatever.
Right.
And that first step can be as small as you make it. It can be small enough that it's free. And
yes.
So money is, in a lot of ways, a fundamentally different excuse than time, because we all have different amounts of money. There are rich people and there are poor people. But whatever you want to do, if you decide that you want to do it, there is a step that you can take, probably today, that will cost you nothing.
I like that. The finer details of where you are right now, instead of the grand total that most people think is their picture right now. I find that if they want to live it right now, so it becomes their picture right now, and they can't see what's right in front of them.
Yeah.
And I'm not excluding myself from that. I'm saying that this is something we've all shared. Mm-hmm. I feel that this is I don't care if you're you own $1 million business already. To find the opportunities, they're still right in front of you, and we're all doing it no matter where we are. Which I think it's a continued exercise. Yeah. And so I really like your point on that. We should just take a look at what we have around us that we can start right now. I think that's very important. The next part that I really wanted to talk about, that you had some great perspectives on this, was responsibilities. People have wives, they have kids, they have close friends, they have the job that they think they have to do, they have soccer practice, they have, you name it. There's some type of responsibility that people will use as a catalyst as to why they haven't started, what they love to do. How do you feel about that? Because I think kids is a big thing. I've seen a lot of people, they'll actually get offended if you ask them why they haven't started what they love. Well, don't you see these 3 little ones?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I do. And I'm wondering what they're seeing in you right now.
Yeah.
It's not that you should feel bad, but I'm posing the question, why haven't you started, and why is it that the kids are stopping you?
Right. If there is, if you're using,
this might be a little controversial.
I
could hear
I'm trying to figure out a
right
succinct way to say it. If you're using your kids as an excuse to not go out and create a happy life for yourself, I think that's a tragedy, not only for you, but for them. If you love your kids, if you want them to be happy, to create a fulfilling life for themselves, then you have to show them how to do that. You can't just give them a bunch of stuff and expect them to figure out how to make a happy life for themselves when you never did, right? If you want your kids to be happy, be happy. If you want your kids to create a fulfilling life for themselves, create a fulfilling life for yourself. Do that work. Show them how to do it now. And that means get started. Because the process may be scary. You're afraid of failure. We all are. It may be scary, but doing it and getting started is taking responsibility for your own happiness and satisfaction. And that is a profound gift that you can give to your children, I think.
Wow. Really powerful. I like that. I could not agree more. And I want to take a little bit of that controversial edge off by saying it's not that you have to be this person that has daycare and so that you can live your dream. We're talking about the direction that you want to go and starting on it now. Even if that's setting a penny aside or sitting down with a piece of notebook paper and just writing what you want. And then maybe the next day you might write, okay, how can I manage this in my free time? Because everybody has free time, even if you have kids. They're asleep. Maybe they're with dad. Maybe they're with grandma. It doesn't matter. And I know we've kind of brought the focus to kids, but this includes your wife. This includes your close friends. Anybody who's got some type of demand on your time. There is the free time to just start doing it now with one tiny step.
Yeah.
That's all it takes. And I find that if you do that, you'll start feeling less and less guilty about taking the bigger steps.
Yeah. And another idea is involve those people. Involve your children,
True.
your
Yes.
wife, or your friends in the venture that you want to do. If you talk to your kids and say, hey, I've always been thinking of starting this business. I don't know how to do it. Like, they like you. They love you. They want you to be happy. And they'll have all sorts of ideas that you won't have thought of.
That's a great point.
That could,
point.
could push you in a direction that could be really interesting and valuable.
This is why I love this guy. It's awesome. So I think we've covered that one pretty well. Mm-hmm. There's still no excuse not to start what you want.
Sure.
No matter
Absolutely agree.
So the next thing is using other people's experiences as a stencil for where you want to go. There's nothing wrong with it. I find that, like you said, it's pretty natural to look at, oh, this guy is very successful. I want to see what he's doing. I think that's probably a very intelligent thing to focus on. But I also find that it can be a cop-out for why you don't start doing what you want to do. Well, these guys didn't have to do this. And I really liked how you brought up some of the things about Facebook. Like, they didn't make excuses about why they didn't really know what was happening. Or it doesn't matter what company it is. Do
you want to watch that excerpt from the video at this point?
Yeah, why don't we check it out?
I think I articulated it pretty clearly.
Yeah, let's check that out.
I saw a similar thing in the first startup that I worked for, where I remember sitting in meetings with leadership and them talking about the lack of direction that the company had, and saying, we're trying to build a product and now we want to change directions and build another product, and like having really challenged them on that. Leadership's response was, well, all startups go through this. All startups go through this phase where they're not quite sure what they're doing. What was the example they gave? They may have even used Facebook. They're like, Facebook started out as a way for college boys to like check out girls. And it didn't occur to me at the time, but when I reflected on it later, I realized all they're doing is making an excuse. Mm-hmm. Like, they're saying, oh, it's okay that we don't know what we're doing because other people that are successful didn't know what they were doing either. And
right.
I'm like, and later I'm thinking, I wish I would have said, yeah, but the people who were successful didn't make that excuse, right? They fixed the problem. They didn't make excuses for themselves.
That's totally true.
Like, Facebook is successful because they didn't sit there and said, oh, it's okay. Microsoft didn't know what they were doing in the 80s. They said, what the are we going to do, and how are we going to fix this? And we got to make changes in order to be...
Okay, yes, very, very well done. And yeah, that was a good part of our conversation there.
Yeah.
And I think this ties right into something really awesome. No matter what other people have been doing, you've got a great perspective on this too. It's not our fault that we were taught this, but in school, we were taught that we need to figure everything out, learn everything before we act. Okay, we got all these 12 years of school, and then we can start looking for work. But if you're not quite satisfied with that, you can go to college for another 4 years, and then you can get the job you want. It's been put into us that things are happening in this order. And I find that even in our passions and our desires, we say to ourselves, well, it wouldn't be very responsible of me to start doing that before I know everything about it.
Right.
And I made a little note here that this ends up being a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you will always convince yourself that there's something else that you need to know before you can start. It just becomes a perpetual motion, because you will not need to know everything. And
can't, in fact,
know
everything.
I mean, as long as you believe that you have to, when are you going to start?
Right.
So what do you have to share on
Yeah,
that?
I definitely strongly feel that there's this enormous disconnect between how we teach kids in school and how we ourselves learn in school and how the real world works. In school, there's always this finished product, and there's a right answer and there's a wrong answer, and someone, your teacher, knows the right answer and wrong answer, and they're just kind of plugging that information into your brain, and then you give it back to them. And that's what a test is, essentially. And you spend years learning that that's how the world works, that you're just creating, or really just replicating, this finished process of thought that someone else has defined for you. And then you get out into the real world, and it's not how it works at all. Like, there's no right answers or wrong answers. You are creating something, whether it be a business or a relationship, or even if you're in a job at a company where your role is fairly well defined, like, you are making real choices on a day-to-day basis about how to do or accomplish some goal out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that going to come up on the
Yeah. I really like how you said that. That's just perfect. It really is about regurgitation.
Yeah.
And there's this, and so what happens is people start focusing on what they need to eat before they actually have anything to give back.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, forget about that, because it's interesting, because sometimes the most simple step forward, people got to complexify it. They've got to find a way. No, it can't be that easy. It's got to be more. I've got to know more. I've got to have more.
Right.
In order to actually take action.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's going to repeat itself.
And I'm very familiar with that feeling of paralysis, almost, that comes from like, oh, I don't know what the right answer is, so I can't do anything. And getting past that, like, you can't really make a wrong decision, like make small decisions to start doing something, and yeah, maybe it won't work. So what?
Right.
Right?
Right.
You're fine, and you've learned something, and now you can take another step.
Absolutely. And you know what? And here's the other thing I like too, is like what you just said. If you don't know where to start, sometimes it's just simply making the conscious decision that you are going to start, that will actually open the pathway, and it will reveal the path to you of where the first step's going to be. It's like, all I have to do is decide that I'm going to start, and then how to start will come to me. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's that simple. If I sit down and say I want to start a business, if I consciously decide I'm starting it, it stops becoming I want to I'm doing it. And there's nobody standing around waiting to pounce on you the minute you say I'm doing this.
Yeah.
That's going to say, no, you're not. That's not going to happen. There's nothing to be afraid of. Just decide to do it, and then the answers will reveal themselves to you. It's amazing.
I think what you said reminded me of one of the things that we talked about in the conversation with the park, and you said there's nothing to be afraid of, and I would disagree with that.
Okay.
And I think in our conversation, you'll see why.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure. I mean, I use the word fear, and I know that fear is definitely an obstacle to starting a venture, or I mean anything, starting a relationship or setting out into unknown territory of any sort. Like, that's kind of the purpose of fear, right? Is to keep us alive. It comes from that time when, like, if I go over that mountain, there might be a whole, pride of lions just waiting to eat a nice, juicy human being. I don't know. I'm afraid, right? But for the most part, we've eliminated that in our society. But that fear is still in us, right? It's programmed into us.
Right.
And so I think the other thing, one of the other lessons that I've learned is that the things that feel scary are scary, but they're not dangerous.
Huh. I like that.
Right. That pride of lions over the next hill is scary and dangerous.
Right.
But that business that you've always had in the back of your head that you've never taken a step to start, it's not dangerous. Like, it's not going to kill you if you start it and it doesn't work out.
Yes.
You'll be
that.
okay.
I like that a lot. There's somebody that it was Jim Carrey, actually, I was watching. I don't know if this is his quote or not, but I was watching a thing with him, and he said, it's good when you can recognize the difference between a dog in your mind that wants to eat you compared to a dog that actually wants to eat you.
Yeah.
It's two very different things.
Yeah,
and
that's
I
a good
like.
quote.
All right, so we can look at it now that once you get used to starting things, and you no longer worry about whether or not you can start, it becomes easier.
Yeah.
You start actually building that muscle. You know, it's just like an exercise, and you start starting.
Yeah.
And you start constantly.
Yeah. And for me, my experience was it was very much like I worry much less about whether I'm doing the right thing, and I worry a lot more about if I'm doing something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doing something is better than doing nothing, and you can't really know before you try something whether or not it's going to work. So try.
It's like that old quote that says, you can plow a mind in your field all day long.
Yeah.
But it doesn't actually get done until you go out and get on the tractor.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So the next point is, and this is an amazing thing here, because this is a sensitive topic, but I think that it's something we can hit head on. Where you came from has nothing to do with whether or not you can start. And I mean your families, how you were raised, whether you have ADD, or you're paraplegic. It doesn't matter what it is. We've got enough examples in the world of people running marathons and creating, what's her name? She's amazing. I'm going to think of it right now. She's the autistic woman that designed the system for cows to be treated better and in the industry.
I don't think I've heard of this.
Yeah, I'll have to think of it, because it's Temple Grandin.
Okay.
I knew it was going to come to me. She is a perfect example of how you don't have to stay where you are. She changed the industry of how we create our environment for the cows. So there's no excuse there either. I myself have come from some places. I think that it's important that you pay attention to the beliefs that you're holding as truth when it comes to starting to do what you love, because that truth might not be yours. What do you feel?
Yeah. I think it's really important to acknowledge that everyone does come from a different place. Like, privilege is absolutely a thing. And some people are just given more in their early lives than other people. I think what you're saying, and correct me if my understanding of this is wrong, is that deciding that your future is going to be entirely determined by what happened to you in the past is just abdicating control.
Yeah.
And just saying, nope, I'm not in charge of my own life. And that is a profoundly disempowering philosophy.
Yes.
It just makes you as a human being feel like, well, I don't have any control over my own life. And that's just not true. No matter what your level of privilege is, you have some control, and taking a step to take the control that you do have starts to grow the amount of control you have, as opposed to just saying, nope.
Yes.
I came
Yes.
from
Exactly.
something bad.
I like
and
that.
I think we had part of our conversation in the park was how you are in the ongoing process of doing that in your own life, because you have overcome a lot of challenges from your earlier life. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, and thank you for that, because I think that this could be related relative to people, whether or not you were given that nice, for lack of a better term, you had everything you needed as a child, or maybe you came from a little bit rougher situations. We talked about being worthy, let's take a look at that. I know this is not something that's that uncommon, because I keep that in mind all the time. I came from impoverished mindsets, environments, limited beliefs, substance abuse, all these things. I don't consider that of myself a victim because of that, because I think that the same ideas about being worthy exist within the person that grew up in the $1 million home, and with the parents that were pushing them to join soccer and ballet and all these things, because then do they feel worthy about changing the path that was given to them? it's the same thing. I think that we have different details, and I think that worthiness is a huge part of the self-orientation that we have in each step we take through our day, because it doesn't matter if you're working at a rubber plant or you're working in the White House. I think that your worthiness still comes home with you, and it still exists independently, but somehow paradoxically intertwined with your job and the things that you do that you think you have to do. And so worthiness.
Yeah, that's the story that you shared about yourself is interesting to me. I'm curious if you have seen a transformation in yourself from feelings of unworthiness towards more feelings of worthiness, or if that feeling of worthiness is something that you feel like has always just kind of been a part of you.
It's a very good question. I do feel, here's the interesting thing, and I don't want to make this too convoluted, but I do feel the transformation of it, but I also felt that it was always with me. Because as a child, I knew looking around that everybody else around me had the same thing. They all deserved everything. But either A, they were oblivious to it, or ignorant to it, or chose not to look at it because of their own self-induced punishments that they gave themselves because of what they thought was their choices have done.
Okay.
So as I left that, see, here's where my worthiness came from, is I started feeling worthy of not being responsible for my family. So yeah, I mean, there's a little bit about me, and I think that I'm glad to share that. I think that that'll help some people. But I really like how you've kind of opened up the playing field a little bit. That, well, it works for some people. There's some things that work for some people, and then there's others that are saying, well, I've already tried that. You know, I've already had those thoughts. I've already had those ambitions, and I still get shut down. And I remember you had mentioned something about some people's conditions within their...
Help me remember that.
Well, this had to do with how people were brought up, and you said that some people, you know, they still believe they're failures no matter what they do.
Yeah. Yeah, there are definitely messages that we receive over and over and over when we're children that just kind of become internal voices that we speak to ourselves with. And one of the most damaging one of those is that voice that says, I am a failure. Like, I can't succeed. And it's really challenging for people who have that voice, because it's a core belief that they have about themselves. And it's not like, I don't want to be glib about the advice we're giving or the conversation that we're having and say, just get over it, right? Because it's not that easy. We're not saying it's easy, we're saying it's possible.
And you covered this very well. Why don't we take a look at that too?
Yeah.
I think this will help.
I know that there are a lot of people who don't have good parents and who consistently received messages of their lack or their failings or their unworthiness when they were young. And that is not something that you just flip with a switch, right? That when you grow into an adult and you have had those messages your whole life, that is becomes a core of who you are.
Yes.
And it takes years and years and years of therapy.
It absolutely could.
To overcome those things.
All right, so that was a great point there. There are people that have been in situations where they were raised in a place that did not necessarily give them the easy route, I guess you could say. And I really agree with that. What are your thoughts on the perseverance through that? The possibility that still remains? Because somebody that needs therapy, I mean, what does that mean?
Yeah.
You know, what does it mean if somebody really needs some help? And they can hear this now and they're saying, well,
yeah,
it's not that easy for me to just flip the switch.
Right. I guess what's occurring to me as you ask me that question is, I'm thinking someone who, you know, maybe had a childhood where they were abused, or, you know, where they just had no escape from some bad situation that they were in, and we say, oh, that person, they could never be, you know, a Bill Gates, for example. And maybe that's true, maybe it's not, I don't know, everyone's an individual. You know, Bill Gates definitely came from an enormously privileged background, right? So he had a lot of those advantages. But I think the mistake of thinking that's happening in there is that we're comparing this person to this other person. And as soon as we start judging our success or failure in comparison to someone else's success or failure, we're already defeating ourselves, because what's the old proverb? There's no honor in being better than someone else. There is only honor in being better than your former self. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about you being at this point in your life and taking a step to improve it, and another step to improve it, and another step to improve it. And that is the good. That is the benefit, that is the positive, and it's not to be like that person over there.
Yes, and I'd like to roll a few words that we had back in the park about that as well. There may be people that it doesn't just flip, and I think that's why it's important to know that you can start, because, see, I always have to do that myself. I'm always like, okay, not everybody walked away from the substance usage and things like I did. Some people are really, really, it's burrowed into them. And so I always think, okay, well, they're not going to do it the same way I did, but I do know this, that they can do it. And that's the one thing I know for sure, that anybody can do it. Anybody can start now, because there's only one thing that stops them, and that's themselves. And even if that part of themselves was not programmed to do it, or given that leeway,
right?
I know that with support, and I know that, like you said, even if they have to get a therapist, that's a starting point.
Yeah, that's true.
Say to yourself, I'm going to get therapy. I'm doing it now, and I will not live this way anymore.
Yeah.
You know, or I don't know what's wrong with me, but I'm going to find out. Make a decision. All right, so that means go for it. That means you can do it. There's nothing that is more powerful than you. And that is the truth. That is something that I know that it can be done, and that the resources can be accessed now. Where you are, where you sit, doesn't matter if it's just a pen. Doesn't matter if it's just the notion. The idea is the first step. So everybody's starting in one way or another, but giving yourself permission to start again, I think, is very, very important, and you can do it. Do you have any final words?
Yeah, we started out the video talking about a lot of excuses that people tend to make for why they can't start. And it occurs to me that maybe we should give you some context. The excuses that we're talking about and that we're refuting in this video, we are refuting because we believe that you can make that change happen in your life, whatever it is, whatever you want to do. Like, we believe that that is within your power. And so the purpose of this video is to help you believe it too, because until you, again, start the journey of changing that belief, like, you're defeating yourself. And until you start, that's the guarantee of failure. So, you know, believe in yourself and just go do whatever it is you want to do.
Even if it sounds a bit cheesy, even the longest journey starts with one step. Thank you guys so much for listening. Califragilistic.